Good evening, everyone. My name is Evangeline Pardesi, President of the UTT SPE Student Chapter, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's technical talk. So digitalization and the energy transition are two fundamental transformations and are emerging trends that enable a revamping of the energy landscape and progress toward continuous energy efficiency improvements. Shell is built on 125 years of technological innovation and is a pioneer in the development and deployment of many digital technologies. So with this in mind, the UTT SPE Student Chapter is pleased to host our Digital Transformation and the Energy Transition session. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. So to help keep background noise to a minimum to the audience, please ensure you mute your microphone, and also with respect to any questions, you can put it in the chat, and at the end, we'll have a Q&A where the questions will be directed to the speakers. So let's begin. And to start things off, we have with us Vikash Supersad. So Vikash Supersad is Shell Trinidad and Tobago's Opportunity Manager for the joint solar project with partners BP and Lightsource BP, and previously the business advisor from the period of 2014 to 2018 to the VP and country chair. His Shell career spans 16 years across downstream, midstream in LNG, and commercial roles in upstream and new business development, including a cross-border gas project with Venezuela. He will soon move to the role of deal associates exploration. Vikash is a chemical and process engineer with a master's in business administration and is keen on developing Caribbean talent to pursue the region's sustainable development goals. So Vikash, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Evangeline, and thanks very much to the UTT SPE Student Chapter for having Brian and myself. I mean, we're very excited to share with you guys here today, on renewables, new energies, the energy transition, and of course, digital transformation. So we've put together a slide pack here, but I think Brian and I thrive in conversation. So we will spend as little time as possible on the slides, but we really want to encourage, conversation, and particularly to hear, the dilemmas from you guys in the audience, your questions, your concerns, your thoughts about the Caribbean's energies, energy future, the energy future in Trinidad. So really looking to engage with you guys and not just, share the slides that we have today. So we structured it. I will talk about energy transition first, and then Brian will come in and talk about digitalization. And then we take some questions at the end, and we hope to have as much time as possible for questions and answers. So before we start, we can't do this in person. We're all meeting here virtually, but please, the safety ground rules still apply. If you're driving, please come off of the call now, pull aside and then redial in. If you're in an office or at home, know where you're located, know your exits, know what your alarm sounds like, and make sure you have all of your emergency equipment, or you know where all of your emergency equipment is, including any emergency contact numbers. So before we start, this is our cautionary note, which we share at the beginning of all of our external engagements. And basically it says that we are going to be making some forward-looking comments, right? We're talking about projects in development. And these are just projections. These things can change in the future. So this cautionary note is just to say, we can't take everything here as definite. It's our best estimation of what we've planned for the future. So let me dive right into it. Just talk quickly about what Shell is globally. So Brian and I are two of 83,000 colleagues across the globe. We operate in more than 70 countries, and if you've been around as long as I have, that footprint was even higher when we had a lot of downstream manufacturing plants in various countries, even in the Caribbean. Just a few select statistics here. We supply 2.5% of the world's gas, which I mean, when you think about the world's gas consumption, 2.5% is quite huge. And in terms of oil production, it's the equivalent of 3.4 million barrels per day. So we know what Trinidad is doing, less than 60,000 or 50,000. So this puts it into context. As a company globally, we supply about 3.4 million barrels per day. In terms of LNG, almost 70 million tons of LNG sold in 2020. And if you think about the size of Atlantic LNG has a capacity of 15 million tons per year. So you're talking about almost 5 times the size of Atlantic LNG in terms of LNG sold by Shell. We spent about $1 billion on renewable energy in 2020. And another $1 billion almost on just R&D, and you see some spends there on social investment, etc. So that's Shell globally, and if we look at Shell at a more of a country level, you guys should be familiar with this. In the North Coast, we have NCMA, the North Coast Marine Area. We would have taken FID, final investment decision, on the Calibri project, which is happening in blocks 4 and blocks 22 in the North Coast. On the East Coast, East Coast Marine Area, or ECMA as we call it, of course, we have dolphin and starfish fields, which are in production. We recently started production in Block 5C, which is called Barracuda. That was the project name. And then onshore, we have, of course, Central Block facility and the Beachfield gas receiving facility. Those are the Shell operated. East Coast is fully a Shell company, and then the North Coast and Central Block are ventures with heritage. In terms of other interests, of course, Atlantic LNG, you'd see we have different ownerships of different trains, ranging between 46% to sort of 57%. In the deep water, we are partners with BHP in the southern deep water area. They are operator of those blocks with 65%. And you'd also see Loran Manatee on this slide, which should probably be updated because we have delinked Loran, which is on the Venezuela side, and we are proceeding with the Manatee development on our side of the border with Venezuela. So just a high level flavor of what Shell does in country. And we will talk later on about, adding a new energies picture to this map, adding a solar plant to this map, which we will spend a couple of minutes talking about as well. But let me dial back for the very, before we dive straight into, what sort of new energies projects and renewable energies projects are happening globally. This is our strategy, and I won't spend too much time on it, but just to share with you that in February of this year, our CEO rolled out this new strategy across the company, and it's about powering progress, and it's really setting our strategy to accelerate the transition of our business to net zero emissions. It's designed to create value for our shareholders, our customers, and of course, the wider society. And there are 4 main goals in support of our purpose. Our purpose, of course, is to power progress together by providing more and cleaner energy solutions. So the first of those is generating shareholder value, right? It's about, providing financial strength to transform our company as the world makes the transition to cleaner energy. Then there's achieving net zero emissions. It's about working with customers across all sectors to accelerate that transition to net zero in step with society. A net zero world is where society stops adding to the total amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Then the third one, powering lives. Powering progress means powering lives and livelihoods through our products, through our activities, and by supporting an inclusive society. And then lastly and importantly, respecting nature by protecting the environment, reducing waste, and making a positive contribution to biodiversity. And all of this is underpinned by our core values of honesty, integrity, and respect for people, and of course, our focus on safety. And this, of course, includes our commitment to doing business in an ethical and transparent way. So this is in a nutshell what Shell is about. It sets the tone for everything we do and all projects that we invest in. So let me spend a couple of minutes on quickly the renewable energy solutions. And I say there's a lot of content here. I'll try not to spend too much time on it, but please feel free to ask questions at the end, and you can ask Brian all of the difficult questions. Right, so this is what our portfolio looks like across the globe. And I think one thing that jumps out here, you would see a lot of activity in Europe. And the reason for that, there's a lot of, the market is very different. The power market is very different from Trinidad. Of course, Trinidad, we have TNTech, which is the sole buyer of power, it's government owned. But in Europe, it's demonopolized. So you can invest in a power project and you can sell directly to consumers. You can buy, if you were living in Europe, you can choose to buy green power as a homeowner. You as a business owner as well can do that, or you have your own industrial project, you can buy green power. So it's a lot of activity in Europe. You'd see the sort of India, Sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana. There are a lot of emerging projects, and those are really about energy access. So you have a lot of people, a high population, but a lot of that population is underserved, right? So they don't have access to power at all, or they don't have regular access to power. So there are a lot of Shell ventures and Shell projects, which we'll see on the next couple of slides, that supply power to these remote areas. Of course, North America, USA, Canada as well, big market for us, Brazil. So we have power operations in more than 20 countries, and we are continuously expanding that portfolio. We hope to soon add Trinidad to this map within the project that we will talk about that is currently under development. And Shell looks at having value from scale, right? So we are across the globe, large countries, and just like LNG, for example, we have an upstream presence in the offshore blocks that we operate and produce gas. We have a midstream presence in transporting and liquefying that LNG. And then you have a downstream presence where that gas is used to produce base oils for lubricants, for example. So it's about having an integrated value chain. And we are sort of building that out in the power sector as well. So it's about having the power production upstream, and then having the transmission and the distribution, and also sale to customers. So just some quick highlights on this. We've won a tender for a massive wind project in the Netherlands, which will be operational by 2030. That has a capacity of 760 megawatts. And if you think about the size of Trinidad, I think we have about 1,800 megawatts of installed capacity. We probably use about 1,400 megawatts of capacity at any peak time. This project by itself, the wind project that we will be doing, is about 760 megawatts. We're doing an industrial scale solar project in Australia. We recently acquired as well a French developer that develops floating wind projects. So that's a new one on the curve. Yes, floating solar and floating wind. And we have partner companies. Silicon Ranch is a company that we have in the US, and Cleantech Solar in Asia, that are doing more than 240 solar projects in 12 countries. So if you think about the project that we're doing in Trinidad, it's actually with Lightsource BP. So Lightsource BP is BP's equivalent to what Silicon Ranch or Cleantech Solar is to Shell. So it's a partly owned company. BP owns 50% of Lightsource BP, and they have partnered with us in the projects that we're doing in Trinidad. So let me not spend too much time. So this is just a map of the solar projects themselves. We have projects, as I said, a lot of in the east of China, Singapore, India, Thailand, Malaysia. Some projects in the US under Silicon Ranch, and of course Netherlands, which is sort of our head office in Shell. We have some projects happening there. Some of them are in our own assets. So there's a chemical plant that we own, and we've put a 27 megawatt solar project in that chemical plant. Hydrogen, of course, is a big one for us. North H2 It's a large hydrogen project that we're doing in Netherlands as well. So you see it sort of in the middle of the screen. And it's in a consortium of a number of partners, and we announced this last year. So the ambition there is to produce green hydrogen using renewable electricity generated by a mega offshore wind farm. So the previous one I spoke about was 760 megawatts. This one is 3 to 4 gigawatts. So that's 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts of wind power to green hydrogen, and we aim to scale that up to maybe 10 gigawatts, so 10,000 megawatts by 2040. So hydrogen it's emerging. You'd see a lot of activity in Germany, and that's because just as we have fuel stations in Trinidad, we are having hydrogen fuel rolled out in Germany as well. Nature-based solutions, so that's another arm of Shell, where we work with different countries and organizations to offset carbon emissions, and it's about a big part of this is reforestation. So if you look at the project, for example, in Australia, Select Carbon, in 2020 we acquired that company. And they run more than 70 carbon farming projects that span an area of up to 10 million hectares. So this is another emerging one as well, and you see a number of nature-based projects around the world. The other big one I just wanted to touch on too was carbon capture and storage. So you'd see Shell in the news for a couple of these as well. So Northern Lights, it's the first project of its kind that allows transport of CO2 from an industrial site to intermediate storage before being transported by pipeline for permanent storage underground. So there's a lot of questions on where these projects can work, and you'd see that they tend to work in some of the more developed, the more advanced markets, such as the UK. There's one called Teesside, again in partnership with BP, and this one is with Equinor and Total in Norway. Last couple slides just before we dive into the local project. Venture capital. Now, this is pretty exciting, and for young people like yourself, you should be pretty excited about this space. So we actually have a team of people that look at startup companies, right? So some young, fresh out of university folks come up with some great ideas, but they need funding. And this is where Shell Ventures come in. We provide that funding in return for an option to purchase equity in the project should it come online. So a lot of, if you think about Silicon Valley in the US, a lot of think tanks that produce new ideas. We have a team that work with these new companies, and these are the locations that we're based. San Francisco, of course, is a big place for solar energy in California. All right, so what's happening in Trinidad? So you'd see externally something called Project Lara, and I think it was named by the Light Source colleagues after our own famous cricketer. But that's the name that you'd see probably in the public domain. So if you hear Project Lara, it's really our 112 megawatt solar farm being jointly developed, of course, with BP and Light Source BP that I mentioned. And it is of course subject to a final investment decision. So we are currently working with the government. This is the first time I think I've worked on a project where you have the Ministry of Energy chairing a committee of a number of ministries and a number of state entities such as the EME, you have TNTech, the Ministry of Finance, Commission of State Lands. So you have a whole host of people that we've been working with and are continuing to work with before we take a final investment decision on this project. And hats off to our colleagues in government, our colleagues in BP and Light Source. This is a first for Trinidad. It's a first for us in Shell in Trinidad. And we're pretty excited about this one. And we are learning a lot as we are going on. So it may be taking a bit longer than we expected initially, but certainly, first of its kind. Want to make sure we do it right. So 2 projects, Orange Grove Solar Project, 20 megawatts, Brecon Castle, 92 megawatts in Phoenix Park across 3 plots of land. Sizes are there 60 hectares, 238 hectares. In terms of power delivered, nearly 50,000 megawatt hours in Orange Grove and over 200,000 megawatt hours in Brecon Castle. So in terms of equivalent, you see the numbers there. This is going to be a lot of green power to the grid, the equivalent of close to 150,000 tons of CO2 per annum removed, and about 30,000 cars, our gas cars, equivalent of taking that off the road. So before I hand over to Brian, and just running over my 20 minutes that I set out, this is what an artist's impression of these sites will look like. And I won't tell you who the artist is, hint, hint, but really sort of a 3D image of, if you are in Point Lisas looking south to San Fernando Hill, that's the top photo. There's a large plot of land, which is the majority of the solar park. There's a piece to the south of it around, and I think that area is called Phoenix Park. And then just to the east of it, there's a bit of a quarry you will see in the middle there. But there's another plot of land across the quarry that is earmarked as well. So still in development. This is to be optimized. We may not use the entire amount of land. There potentially some exciting farming or agri-solar, as we call it, projects that can be done where you have sheep that coexist with the panels. So we potentially looking at a sheep industry. There's certain types of flora and fauna that can coexist with solar, as well as bees. So Light Source BP, our partner, actually produces their own line of honey in the UK from bees that are reared on the solar farm. And then the bottom photo is a smaller plant of Orange Grove. And this is sort of, if you are in Trin City or more the housing area in Trin City, and you're looking south again, over the university's land, 40 hectares. This will be very visible from the highway, of course. So that if you commute from the east coming into Port of Spain, this is something you'd pass every day. So that's really it on just very high level what Shell is globally doing in new energies. There's a lot more content which of course happy to take in questions or offline. But I want to give Brian some time as well to take control and talk about digitalization. So Brian, should I give you this screen here?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
All right. You all seen me? Evangeline, nod your head and you're hearing me all right?
Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks very much, Vikash. Let me introduce myself. So I am Brian Ali, speaking to you today as sort of the digital lead of Shell TNT. But like Vikash, I'll be transitioning roles very shortly. In fact, officially speaking, I already have. My background, like Vikash, is chemical and process engineering. And for the majority of my career, I've worked as a chemical and process engineer in BG and then in Shell in our upstream operations space. But for the last year and a half thereabouts, I've been acting as the digital lead, just as we about started our digital transformation in TNT. And also, again, like Vikash, the business advisor to our current VP and country chair. Vic, we actually have quite a lot in common, man, more than I expected. All right. So let me jump in. We heard quite a bit just now from Vikash around one of the big mega trends that Shell is looking at. That's the energy transition. Another one is digitalization. And the way Evangeline introduced the topic was exactly like that, right? One of the big trends that's pretty much shaping the world around us today, and especially in Shell and Shell TNT. So with these two in mind, as an organization and as an industry, we are in the midst of significant and rapid change. So I look forward to spending maybe Let's try for 15 minutes talking about digitalization. And like Vic said, we should get some time for questions. Before I jump in, what is digitalization? I want to spend a bit of time clarifying this because in a lot of my conversations, the terms digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation are often conflated. And they are in fact different things, right? So digitization is the simplest one. This one refers to the creation of a digital representation of physical objects or attributes. The simple act of copying data from paper into your computer, scanning, is considered digitization, right? And this is the foundational step to our data-driven world today as we know it, because this is the step that allows information to be accessed and analyzed by the vast computing power now available, right? It is the conversion of data in a way that computers can understand. That then feeds into digitalization. Digitalization refers to the enabling, improving, adaptation of processes by leveraging this digitized data to yield deeper insights. So digitalization is about getting insights from that data. In the energy industry, there's a pretty simple and common example of this, and that's around our PLC logic, or simple control systems that are commonplace across all plants. These control systems have existed since the 1940s, right? And your basic control system will consume digitized data from any transmitter, pressure of a stream, temperature of a stream, apply some computerized logic to it, and then on the back end, adjust a device like a valve, right? If pressure too high, it opens a valve on the next side to correct the process and bring the pressure down. That is an example of digitalization. That is an example that has existed since the 1940s. So it is evident from that example that digitalization is not a new concept to the energy industry. So that brings me to digital transformation. This, folks, is the emerging trend within recent years, the concept of a digital transformation. This refers to the overall business change, overall business transformation that is ultimately enabled by digitalization. It fundamentally changes both the structural way a business operates, the structural operations, and even influences our culture. It changes the way we think. It could vary organization to organization based on a specific vision, the challenges, demands. It's all unique. But a digital transformation, no matter where it happens, it all ultimately aims to bring value for the business in a more efficient and agile manner, right? The creation of business value. That's what a digital transformation is. It changes the way we use the digitized data to improve our experience as customers and as employees. This is the megatrend, right? Digital transformation is the megatrend, and this is what we're going to talk about today. But why is it a megatrend worth discussing? So I mentioned before, digital is not new. It's not a new thing. But over the last decade, technology has become cheaper, faster. The amount of data and connectivity has been increasing exponentially. I mean, over the last 5 years, 90% of all data, this is a BC kind of conversation here, was created. You could think about it in terms of social media, how much we use the devices around us. We can't live without some of these things. It kind of makes sense that 90% of all data was created in not even our lifetime, just over the last decade. Over the last decade, there are 4 key developments that have come together that have sort of cemented digital technologies in our daily lives, right? But more importantly, it's also reduced the barrier to entry for industries such as ours. And that's what you see on this end here. We've seen a dramatic drop in the costs of sensors, data storage, and processing. We have more sophisticated analytics algorithms, and things like artificial intelligence has really started to pick up. There has been a rapid increase in computing power, and the most basic, but probably most impactful of them all is wireless access to the internet globally has become quicker and more reliable. These four things have all happened at the same time, and they've happened to drastically increase the competitiveness of our business landscape globally. The energy industry is not immune to this competitiveness. One of the big reasons why, the whole section that Vikash went through around energy is that, for instance, the climate change narrative is putting a lot of pseudo-economic pressures on our industry today. And for that reason, we are trying now more than ever before to continue to generate energy as efficiently as possible. We really cannot afford to waste anything anymore. And one of the key and most powerful levers to facilitate this level of efficiency is that digital transformation. But the fact that digitalization is now so globally accessible and accessible in a big way, it actually means that we are at the risk of becoming obsolete as an industry if we do not pull on this lever to stay competitive. What I'm saying here is that the digital transformation is not really seen as an option anymore. It is almost imperative for our business's survival. And this is broader than just the energy industry. It is much broader than just Shell. But that is why it is a conversation worth having. And so I am glad SPE is interested in hearing about it. So the digital transformation has a big role in delivering our strategic goals in Shell. And we've broken it up across 4 arms: subsurface wells, asset management, customer focused, and then the last one is around digitizing processes throughout. All I really want to say on this particular slide is that it is not a function. It is not a specific part of the business. It applies across all spheres and across all fields. So whether you're a petroleum engineer like Evangeline, or a chemical engineer like me and Vic, or somebody in commercial or finance, we have been applying digitalization across the board, no matter what, to help us achieve our strategic goals. So it is becoming a core part of our business. The way we look at the transformation, however, is premised across 3 focus areas: data, people, and products. The numbers that you see at the top, this 60%, 50%, 10%, it's not scientific. It's subjective. It's indicative numbers. It gives us it shows rather an indication of the value that we see in this particular bucket, and also the effort that we think it takes to get this particular bucket right. So data at 60%, this is what we rely on for making the high impact decisions at all levels in our business. And to make sure that this data is reliable, routinely updated, easily accessible by the right people, is a huge effort. 60% of the effort, but the biggest value as well. It then passes on to the people. The people have to interact with this data, have to have the appropriate skills to be able to efficiently analyze and extract insights from this data, and then also have to be comfortable enough to use these insights to augment their own experiences when making decisions. This vastly changes the way we work. And we think that this takes a significant amount of effort, but also has associated with it the majority of value. The paradigm shift for me when I started to conceptualize digitalization or digital transformation was around this last bit, the products. When I think about digitalization, the things like robots, the things like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, etc., those are the things that actually come to mind first. But the paradigm that we've taken in Shell is that this actually has the least amount of value associated with it and is also the least amount of effort. Given how vast digitalization has grown globally in recent time, it's almost easy to get anything relevant to one of these fancy blue circles here that you could buy off the shelf and plug and play into your system, plug and play into your business. So the level of effort to get this is actually quite low. The problem is, if we don't appreciate the value of our data and we don't amend the way we think about that data and the way we work to leverage that data, there is also the least amount of value that you will derive from this thing. So while it is important and flashy and nice, we have seen that the majority of our effort in the near term, as we start our digital transformation journey, lies here in the data piece. So I want to spend a bit of time, 12 minutes. Yeah, I want to leave some time for some demo in the end. So watching my time really closely. I want to talk a little bit about data analytics maturity and how it's been evolving in Shell. The way it's been evolving in Shell will go over a few more years. Based on the demographic of the audience that Evangeline provided, this is where you could discern some of the relevance of that data science course, Evangeline, that you have coming up in your final year. But this is where it sort of becomes relevant, and you can kind of see the skill set that's required as we evolve, right? We see data analytics as a maturity staircase, and as you step up each staircase, you get closer to getting higher value insights from your data. So the lower value ones are down here. Let me step you through this as quickly as I can. So at the lowest rung, we have descriptive analytics. Descriptive analytics is the most common. It's simply described what has happened in the past. As professionals, we do it all the time. As students, you do it all the time. Every single time you pull a graph where you trend a variable over time, that's an example of descriptive analytics. It actually carries the least amount of value out of everything, because simply knowing what happened without anything else, you can't really action it too much. So over the last 2 years, and it's taken about 2 years, we've put a lot of effort into dashboarding these sorts of analyses, right? Cleaning up the data and making it such that using tools like Power BI and Spotfire, these descriptive analytics are available like that without any significant effort. It's always live, it's always being updated. So our engineers could spend less time here and start spending more time at these higher levels. At the next rung, it's diagnostic analytics. And this helps us understand. This is where we look at what happened in the past and try to say why it happened. And this is the bread and butter of an engineer, right? This is kind of what we do. In the same way in Shell, we do it every day. Root cause analyses. If a plant breaks down, we want to figure out why. If an incident takes place, we do an investigation to figure out why. But the part that is new from the perspective of digitalization is that with this vast computing power available, we can leverage data to generate these diagnostic insights automatically, kind of like what we've done with descriptive. And the whole idea is that we want to start freeing up as much time as possible so we could start working on the next level and moving up the chain. Here, we've started to leverage Python coding language, one of the easiest and most common ones, and another platform called Databricks, to do some of those, to use some of those machine learning algorithms that you might or mightn't learn about, like regression and classification, to help us do these diagnostic analyses automatically. Again, if we get that right, it frees up time for us to get into the predictive space. In Shell TNT, we've just done a pilot of predictive analytics using some pumps. In Shell globally, predictive analytics have been used actually quite widely, especially with compressors and control valves, and with quite a lot of success. And the algorithms are being expanded to a lot of different use cases. Predictive analytics is also self-explanatory, right? This is where the machine learning or the code is going to tell you what may happen, right? Predict. But this requires a large amount of data. Within the Shell ecosystem alone, we've actually integrated about 1.3 trillion data points together to help train machine coding to give us these sorts of predictive analytics. More broadly than just Shell, we have Baker Hughes, Microsoft, and a new company called C3 AI. And we've started to collaborate in something that you could actually look up called the Open AI Energy Initiative, which provides a framework, right? We've just basically brought all our data together to train these AI solutions to make them more robust. Lots happening here. Prescriptive, we're not there yet. This is basically where the machine learning is going to tell you what you could potentially do, what action you could take to influence a specific outcome. And it's kind of like how driverless cars work now, but I don't have any examples for you in the energy industry as yet, but we want to get there. And that's how the data analytics maturity journey is heading. And this is broader again than just Shell. This is industry-wide. 5:40, I have time, good, okay. We have a ton of different products across a ton of different areas. I think I'm gonna pause here and switch to my demo and then come back in, right? If we get time. There's one thing I want to talk about, and that's around disruptive future technologies. So one of the biggest things that we've done in Shell TNT, and we've actually piloted this for the wider Shell company, is the creation of something called a digital twin. A digital twin. Sorry, you're seeing a map of Trinidad now? Evangeline, just nod your head, yes. Yeah, good, right. So a digital twin is a virtual representation of your asset, right? We had this in plan for quite next year, 2022. COVID came, and when COVID came, it meant that a lot of the engineers had to start working from home. It was difficult to get to our facilities and our sites to do the troubleshooting and provide the sort of support we're accustomed to. Those big projects that Vikash and others like him are working on are supported by teams in Houston, The Hague, etc. They couldn't even come into the country because borders were closed. We scrape up some money and we accelerated the development of a digital twin so that engineers could have access to our facilities on their computer. And in a relatively short space of time, we've gotten to this stage for the group, and now it's being replicated in other assets across the world. But we did this in Trinidad first, right? I've taken you here to one of our offshore facilities in the East Coast Dolphin, where quite a lot of activity is currently taking place with projects, right? This, what you see in here, is the result of a variety of different data sources integrated and stitched together to give us a virtual representation of the site that is live, that is interactable. So our engineers at home could click through, scroll through, walk through the facility, talk to the guys at site and troubleshoot and discuss some of these problems. And the engineers that work halfway across the world could access information related to all the different types of engineering documents. Work orders is how we track any activity that happened related to a piece of equipment. Even do 3D views of the thing, all at home. So we've been having a lot of meetings, engineering and doing a set of concept select work on that Manatee project as an example that Vikash spoke about, all by walking through this tool here. Now, for those of you who are in petroleum engineering, we started to do something extra exciting to you, but particularly boring for me. And that's where we've started to map even below the surface of the facility. Let me kill the ocean. See, ocean gets in my way, right? And let me put on some of the subsea equipment, right? We've started to map all our pipelines that pull from different parts of the reservoir. And we've started to even map our reservoir onto this. So what this software does, and it's quite unique, is that it allows us to essentially track a molecule of gas all the way from the reservoir with all these things that Evangeline understands and I don't, porosity, etc., from the reservoir all the way up through the facility to the point of export. And we've been using this tool to try to make that journey as efficient as possible, right? So it's as smooth as possible. And this is one of the pieces of disruptive technology that I was talking about and wanted to play with today. 5:45, I'm going to stop. I'm not even going to go into no fancy conclusion. Evangeline, I'll hand over to you and let's get into some questions.
Thanks so much, Vikash and Brian. I really enjoyed the demo shared. It was really good. All right, so let's jump into questions. If anybody have any questions, feel free to unmute or send in the chat. Let me So a question from me would be, what are some of the barriers that you all at Shell have faced thus far whilst pursuing the path of, well, to digital transformation?
Evangeline, I'm trying to stop sharing my screen and I'm struggling, and I am the digital lead. So you have to repeat that question for me. But if you have one for Vikash, while I figure this thing out, I'll appreciate if you go ahead with him first.
All right, no problem. Let me see. For Vikash. Do you think that there are any limits to growth for renewables currently?
Yeah, I mean, let me just take, good question, right? Let me take Trinidad as an example. I would have shared that the power generation capacity we have is about 1.8 gigawatts. We actually use 1.4. So what happens is that TNTech pays for power that is not using, right? They pay for capacity. So they are paying all of the independent power producers for this power, even though we're not using it as a country. What that means is that when our project comes online, it will be in addition to the existing capacity. So it's not as if Trinidad is, we have a capacity of 1.4 and we use 1.4, we can just add and replace, or we will be below capacity. So I think that is a real challenge for us in Trinidad that we need to work out to encourage the acceleration of more renewables. The government has set a target of 30% of our power mix by 2030, I believe. So there is some growth we expect on the horizon, but Trinidad is not in the same position as an expanding market where people need access to power. So instead of let's look at India or China or sub-Saharan Africa, decision makers have a real option now. Do I put down a coal plant or an oil plant to produce power, or do I put renewable power in there to meet that growth? But Trinidad is different, right? We have an oversupply of existing power sources. Let me stop there to go back to Brian.
Okay, thanks, Vikash. So, Brian, the question was, what are some of the barriers that you all at Shell have faced thus far whilst pursuing the path to digital transformation?
I like that question. It actually, the way I'll answer that is also aligned to what Adrian just put in the chat around the culture shift. The culture shift has been one of the biggest issues, and we've coined that a term called change management, which when you join the industry, you'll find out quite a lot about. There are three main challenges here, right? The first thing is around what we found is it's quite difficult for engineers to let go of their data. In order for these tools to be stitched together, for things like dashboards to be published for everybody to see without you having to go to the owner of the information, without you having to go to the specific engineer to find out, it means that people have to stop using the Excel spreadsheets that we know and love on our own computers and start putting it in more and more public locations, right? I don't know if it's still the same way, but back when I was in school, Excel was my best friend. And as an engineer, I did everything in my own little way, and I had my own little approach to using Excel to track whatever I needed to track as an engineer on a routine basis. To put that in a public location where anybody could access it means that it needed to be formatted differently, and anybody could go in and challenge and so on. And we've actually found that getting people to let go of that has been one of the big things. The second biggest thing is the fact that, the whole bit about the analytics maturity and the insights that we want to automatically generate from data. It's about getting people to trust those insights. You ever heard that when you come out of university, it's such a book thing, but the experience carries a lot more weight to it. In many ways, the gut feeling that these really experienced professionals carry is intense. It's almost like a computer program that has learned from a vast database of information to then have these sorts of insights. And what we aren't able to do very easily as yet is get these people who have this strong reliance on their gut instinct to trust that the insights that a machine learning algorithm can spit out from also learning from a vast amount of information is relevant and worth considering. So trusting the insights from these automatically generated things is another big challenge. And I'll stop there. That's I think the big two.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any questions? Don't be shy.
I'm surprised the question didn't come in around how did two chemical engineers end up working in digital transformation and solar. We didn't certainly set out to study that at university, right? So I seen a comment somebody was about to ask that, right? So let me probably just give you a quick backstory and Brian can give his. So as a chemical engineer, I actually started working in the manufacturing industry and I joined Shell's manufacturing industry in Trinidad, which was in Point Lisas, a lubricant manufacturing facility, and I used to do planning. So I went from process engineering to planning, and then when Shell bought Repsol, I moved to that midstream team that now was in charge of Atlantic LNG. So I went from a planner to a bit of a commercial guy. And then when Shell bought BG in 2016, I went from midstream Atlantic commercial to upstream commercial. And then people started to say, hey, let's do some gas deals with Venezuela. Who could speak Spanish? I was like, yo puedo hablar español. And I started working on new business deals in Venezuela. And then solar project came along. They said, who has new business development experience? I say, okay, I just did something in Venezuela. Let's try this. So the point I want to make, it's all lateral, right? It's about taking the opportunities as they come. It's about positioning yourself and then moving into that space. So I certainly didn't set out there. I don't know where the next 10 years will take me. Well, the next role is take me back to exploration. So going in the other direction. But really approach it with an open mind, especially the young folks on the call.
Oh yeah, I call that. The bit on the digitalization front, when you enter the workplace, you'll find it very relevant. You're going to be dealing with a vast amount of data, and you'll start finding your own ways to navigate that space. And it's what happened with me. So I started to appreciate that the power of Excel was much broader than I'd ever known before. And I started to do little short courses, legitimately. I never did computer science or data science or Python coding or anything like that. But I started to do little bits and pieces just to help me in my day job. And by the time we started to think about digital transformation, they needed somebody who had an appreciation of the business and who had an appreciation of what digitalization could do. And at that point in time, I was the only one who was able to marry both areas. So almost by chance, kind of like Vic, I fell into the digitalization space. But since computers are going to be like your best friends, why doesn't it make sense? Like how Vic knows Spanish and it took him into that sort of business. Doesn't it make sense to speak the language of what will essentially be your closest partner in the workplace? And that's sort of the mentality I have when it comes to data science and digitalization and so on.
Okay, nice. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. So is the current architecture of Trinidad's grid, which is not as digitized as some countries, a large barrier to the plant's development?
I think that's a dual question, right? So talking about the existing grid and how digital it is now, I can't say what TNTech does on the inside. I think the reliability of TNTech and power supply has vastly improved from when we were young people and regular blackouts. I think the grid is I think the grid has improved a lot over the years. There's not necessarily any physical or infrastructural barriers, I think, to get solar power into the grid. What our partner Lightsource really helps with is that expertise, right? So all of the software, all of the knowledge, they bring that to the consortium, and that's why we've really partnered with them. They have over 2 gigawatts of solar projects delivered around the world, so they really know how to construct a plant, tie it into the national grid, and make sure that it's a seamless electrons flow seamlessly across. So I mean that's very limited knowledge of that in that area, but I'm confident we can get that done.
Sidika asked, what are some examples of machine learning applications utilized by Shell?
Sidika, I tell you, I am a chemical engineer, and there's a hard question you asked me. So we have been using, I don't know how much you know about it, but classification algorithms, which is supervised learning machine models. We've been using random forest generation, and I think it's been KNN as well, K neural networks for the compressor modules. We've been using random forest generation for emulsion classification. I think you would probably know about that, or sorry, predicting the potential for emulsions. And you know, different algorithms to suit different things, but those are the two that I know about. But they're all supervised learning models, for if you know what that means. And then that's as technical as I can go.
Another question that was sent privately. So has Shell been utilizing AR and VR in terms of exploration and production?
Exploration, not yet. Production and asset optimization, yes. And in Shell Trinidad and Tobago, we also, in Shell TNT, we've also piloted the first virtual reality headsets for operator competency. So we have these really cool modules. I did one around working at heights, and my hands were actually sweating, I think, while I was going through it. It was crazy. But on top of that, we also use augmented reality. So there are these cool headsets that we call RealWear. They're attached to your helmet, and over one eye, voice activated, you have access to the full database of information for the site. And again, this is pilot. We've had what we call remote mentoring sessions, where as a new operator goes onto the field and walks through a particular part of the plant, we have the experienced guys basically over his shoulder virtually, seeing what he's seeing and coaching him through how to do X, Y, and Z. So yes, AR and VR, by the time you join, that it'll be commonplace.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
So Evangeline, I know we almost had time, but there's one question that is in the chat I really want Brian and myself to talk about quickly. What short courses do you recommend for graduate engineers that would better prepare them to do their work? I may be a bit of a maverick here, but I don't believe in short courses as the solution, to be quite honest. Not trying to shoot down any short course provider, but I honestly believe between all of the information that you have publicly, all of your networks that you have, I think you have access to a huge amount of information. And I personally prefer to be a part of a project that somebody is working on, even a fly on the wall. So I may not be in digital transformation, but I might say someone in my network, hey, Brian, you mind if I sit down in this meeting to hear what you guys talking about? And I think that works wonders. You get a bit of on-the-job training. It's not costly, and you get real life experience doing that. So I would encourage young people like yourself to find opportunities like that. And I mean, after this call, Brian and I are available. Just reach out to us, and we'd be glad to talk you through on a one-to-one basis. If you have any concerns or queries about how you can get into that space.
Well said, Vic. Agree.
We have one more question in the chat. Do you think Shell is on the path to achieving net zero?
So in less than 60 seconds remain, I will say yes. There's a whole narrative that goes behind that, but I think so. Compared to where I was when I started Shell 15 years ago, I think the employees are the driving force. You have informal communities in Shell, like the Future Energies Lions, that are not working on new energies projects, but they are just so driven to get get to our new energies and net zero targets. So I would say yes, totally.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great. So thanks everyone for sending your questions. And before we sign off, just want to share my screen real quick. Are you all seeing my screen? Yeah. Okay. So Brian and Vikash, on behalf of the UTT SPE Student Chapter, we would like to say thank you so much for facilitating this session on digital transformation and the energy transition. This is actually our first technical session to kick off the year for us. So I'm really glad that you all set the tone for us for the rest of this year, and I'm looking forward to having you all again. So thanks so much.
Thanks very much, guys, for having us.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes. So have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
You too, guys. Bye-bye.